The internet is the only place today which will help you find the nichest content you're looking for. On YouTube you can practically find anything, ranging from speedrunners playing games blindfolded to stumbling upon entire albums of music dedicated to exploring crippling diseases. However, one of the many things that I find wonderful with the internet as a shared platform is that you can discover entirely new aesthetics made by practically anyone as long as they have access to the internet and a single idea. In early 2019, you could find posts on 4chan's paranormal board which discussed disquieting images that just feel off. And if this rings a bell, that's because this is where this famous picture was originally published. The aim with these posts were to connect people around pictures that made them feel a certain way, without really knowing how to call that feeling. The same thing was observed in 2015, when the cursed images phenomenon gained traction on Tumblr and Twitter. But this newly discussed aesthetic, centered around nostalgic, empty, transitional places, emerged more as its own standalone trend. And by the time people had agreed on what to name this aesthetic, it was about to become one of the internet's most recognizable trends. Now, I'm not here to discuss this gain in popularity, as you already can find hundreds of videos on the subject. My aim is more to explore how this trend was completely opposed to what the original picture stood for, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it will definitely help us explore how different things could have been if this feeling had remained uncertain and closer to the original movement. When you hear the word liminal, or even the name liminal spaces given to places that feel off for many different reasons, it's enough to make your eyes roll. I mean, you've seen these images 1,000 times. You've heard why the contrast between emptiness and life creates a feeling of unease. I talked about this in my Left 4 Dead 2 video a month ago, and some of you reminded me how unoriginal of a decision this was. And you know what? I agree. Sure, the aesthetic itself is still popular, but that's exactly why it feels so overdone to us today. Popularity. As you probably already know, the origins behind this image were recently discovered, and I'll put a link in the description to a video by Farrell McGuire, doing a better job than me at discussing how exactly it was found. This discovery was considered by some as the final nail in the coffin for liminality. Because you see, up until that point, you could always appreciate the backrooms or liminality as a whole through mystery. Sure, this image was the reason why the aesthetic as a whole became so overdone, since it created the backrooms we know today. But we could still fantasize over where this picture itself was taken. We had no idea in which country it was taken, or even when exactly. It led people up all sorts of trails, made them overanalyze the available image, even going as far as theorizing over the lighting. But in the end, all we had was this strange and uncanny picture, these yellow walls, the carpeted floor, and these horrible neon lights. The image, at the end of the day, was best described as a disquieting image that just feels off. An image with no name and no origin. On top of that, we knew that the image itself was real, so it anchored the image in reality, making it, as well as the rest of the most notable liminal space images, even stranger. We could all finally get behind this simple yet very complex feeling, represented by a single image. But that was until the real location was found, not too long ago, ultimately devoiding the picture of its last working element: uncertainty. And while I said this was considered by some as the final nail in the coffin for the genre, at least for now, what really changed the original idea, based on a strange feeling, were the backrooms themselves. Take a look at the Backrooms wiki today, and you'll instantly feel overwhelmed with how many pages were made, describing entities, objects, tales, or even the hundreds of levels that exist, each created by internet users. You'll feel the same as when you first discovered the SCP wiki in the early days of the internet, browsing the different pages to find the most dangerous and over-the-top SCPs. Looking back at where this trend began, we see it has become much more complex. You are no longer alone, since you can encounter different groups, factions, or even entities. These entities can also be friendly. You also shouldn't be desperate to survive, since you can find practically every tool imaginable. You can also find food and water, as well as objects which, to be honest, resemble more of what you would find in the SCP Wiki. And lastly, you can find yourself lost in the hundreds of levels, which can all feature sub-levels themselves, making the original Backrooms and its millions of kilometers feel small in comparison. The problem with all of these is that they denaturalize the essence of what made liminality so interesting in the first place. And on top of that, soon after the Backrooms subgenre became popular after COVID, the theme itself became oversaturated with content, if I dare call it content, that served no other meaning than to benefit from the popularity. The wiki, coupled with what the Backrooms had become, left very little time for liminality to develop as its own aesthetic, as it's now instantly overshadowed by the kids-friendly slopware still served today. But for what it's worth, and as I said earlier, complexity isn't all bad in itself. Some levels take inspiration from the calmness of the After Hours core, which focused less on being hunted, but on what made liminality so uneasy in the first place. Nostalgia, sadness, and the passage of time make these places peaceful. And while they can definitely be unsettling, we still go back to that random feeling which began the whole thing. Liminalcore features a subgenre centered around pool rooms, which is also something that was incorporated into the Backrooms later on. A good illustration of this genre I can think of are Jared Pikes' renders from his Pool Rooms found footage video, and while they may not be anchored in reality as they are all 3D renders made on Blender, the mixed feelings that we feel when witnessing these places in the eyes of someone exploring them remains the same. I believe that while this calmness is important, just like the calmness which characterized the After Hours aesthetic, it's still important to remember the roots of liminal spaces as essentially being incredibly dangerous places. Popularity often made people forget that the Backrooms were feared not for the entities they contained over time, but for the very unsettling reality they represent. One of the best artists to have reminded people of that in the first place is none other than Kane Pixels himself. In the third found footage from his Backrooms series, you follow a random guy videotaping his day-to-day life, until he realizes strange things around him start to happen.
Fuck me.
Before long, he finds himself in another world, with no way back into his home. He essentially becomes stuck in an infinite maze made up of hallways and random furniture, with no one there to actually help him. And when he does meet someone, even if that person genuinely wants to help, he just gets them in danger too.
Alright, listen, we're having some of the wainscoting here redone. I can open up the wall here, it's still loose. What the fuck? What? Oh my god. Oh my god, wow, what the fuck? Hello?
Ultimately, we'll have to face the dire reality of either being hunted down by one of the entities he saw earlier, or, more realistically, of never getting the water and food he needs in order to survive. Kane Pixels' take on liminality was genuine when he made his first Backrooms video, precisely because at the time he had actually no idea a Backrooms wiki even existed.
When it first came out, I was surprised to see all these comments of people telling me that this video is inaccurate and like, this isn't the Backrooms, this is fake, this is wrong, you're doing the Backrooms wrong. And I am like, what? What are you talking about? I'm doing the Backrooms wrong? So I had no clue there was a fandom or a wiki or any of that stuff. I had no clue. The thing I find interesting is the environment, not the entities or whatever you want to call them.
Right.
My series only has only identified the one which has been seen as maybe like a total runtime of maybe like 3 combined minutes that it's even present.
Oh, what, the bacteria guy, right?
Yeah, and I don't even call it that. It has no name.
By making the Backrooms based on the roots of liminal spaces, which he puts effort into portraying in each episode. He casts aside the entities, while insisting on the utter helplessness and loneliness brought out by the scenery alone. All in all, it boils down to the current day situation. On one hand, a community which doesn't take the Backrooms seriously, which is perfectly okay, but this tends to lead to creating a group of people who content farm from the concept to gain popularity. And this is actually the furthest thing from what liminality was made for when initially built. While on the other hand, you have those who are attracted by the familiar and unsettling images posted all those years ago on 4chan, which focus less on what is found in liminal spaces, but on what these spaces are. Creepy, nostalgic, or calm transitional places, vacant and forgotten in time. Cane Pixels, but also other incredibly talented artists, like NDR Animations, who recently made a movie compilation of his backroom renders. All of these people are part of the second group. They willingly or even unwillingly lead the movement of those who wish to reclaim and recapture the origins of liminal spaces. And who knows, maybe in the long run this aesthetic will evolve into something else entirely, or it will fade in order to give way to an entirely new internet phenomenon, based on a feeling that we still can't describe.